They're all behaving very nicely, all sitting down joyfully. We've heard about how vital funding is, that funding is essentially the rocket fuel for ideas. It enables ideas to come through to reality. So let's talk about the different routes. There's bootstrapping, there's debt funding, there's VCs, there's investment rounds, there's multiple different stages. Of course, it depends on what requirements of companies are, but how do the routes compare? What is right and when? And how do the psychologies of entrepreneurs affect funding routes? I think that latter is particularly interesting. Here to discuss some more, please welcome Lauren Couch of Growth Lending, Cherie-Anne Baxter of Unividual, Richard Spilsbiry of Linkstone Advisory, there we are, they're all up here, and Ed Tellwright of British Business Bank. I want you to each, like an entrepreneur, give me the elevator pitch in under a minute of what you do. Now, I'm going to start with you, Richard. What do you do? I don't know. Let's keep talking till it does. There you go.
Hopefully that works. That is the wrong order. Linkstone Advisory, we provide corporate finance and practical support to entrepreneurs, mainly to scale, to acquire, to transform and exit. So typically working with clients from venture growth to listed companies.
Very good. Yeah, pass along. Cherie-Anne, you tell us about Unividual.
Hi, so my business is Unividual, which is a family-run business in London, Bath and Edinburgh. And we help entrepreneurs to plan for the present and the future and take growth as an opportunity for strategy and facilitate that growth. And by the way, Greg, you didn't tell us we were doing an elevator pitch, so thanks.
Well, you know, the future is unwritten, and so is some of this conference. Is that a link? There's not a link at all. Rubbish. There you go.
Let's see if this one works. Great.
Yeah.
British Business Bank. So for those of you in the room that don't know, we're the Economic Development Bank for the UK. Our aim is to drive prosperity and sustainable growth across the UK, as well as a transition to net zero. But the important part of it is about making access to finance for SMEs easier. So you can't get money from us directly. I'm sorry to say, I know we've got bank in the name, but we work with delivery partners that provide cash and capital to SMEs.
And Lauren, bit of a clue in the name, Growth Lending. What's this about?
Yeah, so we are a international finance company. We provide funding anywhere from businesses that are 3 months old all the way to established SMEs. We provide venture debt, growth loans, invoice finance and selective invoice finance facility.
Very good. Let's start with bootstrapping, which is where many businesses begin with, i.e. financing it yourself. It's often regarded as the most value accretive way of developing a company. No equity dilution, no loss of influence, let alone of control. Yet self-funding is clearly, by definition, a limiter and can create barriers to transitioning to other forms of funding. Talk us through how you advise entrepreneurs at this stage, those who are saying, you know what, we can run this ourselves. Who'd like to take that? Cherie-Anne, you look as though, no? You go.
Okay, so it all depends on the ambition of your business and how quickly you want to grow. So I always say that the biggest barrier to growth is who's your biggest competition? It's normally yourself, and it's normally the psychology behind that. The fear of losing control of your business. But actually, if you partner with the right individuals and have the money available, you can normally grow much quicker and be ahead of the competition. So my advice to people is look at your own value systems, look at your own goals and when you want to achieve them, and ask yourself, how do I achieve that? What money do I need? What expertise do I need outside of my own? And be very honest with yourself.
That psychological barrier we'll come to. Richard.
Very often for entrepreneurs, so there can be options around something that's called working capital management. So thinking about when they get paid and how they get paid and accelerating that. And that can be really important. A lot of business, and that's not really bootstrapping. That's just making sure that you're using the most of what you've already got. The second area that startups and early stage businesses can look at is getting support from potential partners. So if you're providing a product which is really unique, it's really good why as to why the business is being created, then very often you will find parties in the supply chain who will be interested in supporting you, whether that be through paying in advance or by giving you preferential credit terms, and that can help accelerate the business.
Or indeed products, like in hospitality, often as not, it suits suppliers to give product to help seed a market. There are routes of finding other ways of offsetting cost, I guess, inside businesses. Ed?
I'll just jump on that as well, to something Lauren said earlier around the options. There are numerous options for businesses to finance themselves. So in addition to understanding your aspirations, where you want to go, I know it's difficult, it's not very easy, and you probably need to find somebody that's knowledgeable in those areas, but understanding what finance options are available to you and what they mean to your business is important to planning that journey. If you don't understand what they are, what the options are available to you, as I quite often see, and I'm sure the other panelists will see, businesses start up, they look to grow, they go to their bank says no, they've watched Dragon's Den, so they say, all right, well, it must be equity. There are so many other options available to businesses. So, yes, it's hard work running a business, and I'm not trying to give you homework, but understanding and researching what options are there and available to you and what they mean for your business is quite crucial to that growth journey.
Let's touch on debt as a means of running and driving a business. Lauren, were you about to say something? Sorry, sorry if I cut across you. The debt in many ways is quite efficient. It's quite a reasonable way of doing it, despite rising interest rates, provided you can cover the interest. The principal will eventually take care of itself. That's the theory of it. But other than anything for more dramatic scaling, when is debt not the better option? You retain all the equity?
It's all down to affordability, though, isn't it? And actually having something that can afford repayments. So it depends on what investment you need to get the business off the ground. Some businesses need heavy investment. They need, they need the likes of private equity, such as Nigel's business, to develop the product to start with. So there's no point taking debt on when you may not even be generating any revenue for 2 years.
So at a pre-revenue stage, debt is not the route. Cherie-Anne?
When I first joined Unividual, which was founded by my dad, we did a management buyout, so we had to take on quite a considerable amount of debt to allow him to take equity out of the business. And I think the biggest thing that impacted us is the repayment of that on a monthly basis, which comes to, I'll share this with everyone, but it comes to around £10,000 a month, which is quite a lot of money. But that's actually de-risked the business. I think there's ways that a lot of people will take out a loan and they'll have certain terms, but then you can actually redo that again, and you can take that over a longer term. So a classic example of this is a football stadium being built. At the start, there's no stadium, so the debt that you're taking out might only be a 5-year loan term. But once the stadium's built and the football club can then demonstrate we've got revenue and it's working, they can then refinance that over, say, 50 years. And then that means that makes it a lot cheaper from a cash flow point of view. So
it's a very good thought. It's proof of concept on a massive scale, a stadium. Richard?
It will very often depend on the industry that you're in. So, for example, if you're in an asset-backed industry, then there are a lot of different options available to you, even at the very earliest stages of the business. But if you're in a tech business, for example, then Innovate UK, and there are grants available, and it's worth looking out for those. Now, whether they be from Innovate UK or in the local area, we have WECA, who are very good at supporting businesses, and there are other ecosystem providers like TechSpark, who also provide a network and also Set Squared as well. So it's worth looking out for those options, because they can open doors and they can make you realise what level of support there is there, and it can be cheaper at the very early stage than the 50,000 startup loan, which is generally available.
That point about funding and WECA specifically is pretty close home for EntreConf. We had a grant, a small grant, but a very helpful grant in 2020 to help us get EntreConf off the ground. Look out there are sources of funds. I know a number of companies here have found funds previously. Let's come on to equity financing, perhaps with you, Richard, again. Talk us through the different structures about what might or might not work best for companies, say, angel rounds and then into seed rounds, series rounds, A, B, C, and so on.
The funding that you're looking for will very much depend on the stage of the business. And even within the standard labels, there are different options. So, for example, the angel round might begin with friends and family at a very early stage, and then progress to a slightly more sort of organised or structured angel actors, and then move into, say, for equity venture capital. There'll be some venture capital companies who will invest in earlier stage businesses. Other venture capital players will only invest in later stage businesses. So there's an enormous range out there and significant options. Within that, has to be said, it's worth, I think, talking to an advisor and understanding what's going on in the market, because there will be some people who will give you very bad terms, and there will also be very good terms out there. Just as with the banks and with lending, then some banks will just say no, whereas there are other very good and active lenders out there.
And in terms of an ecosystem, a successful exiting entrepreneur is today is tomorrow's investor. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm aware of several here today, who have subsequently invested in early stage businesses. They know what entrepreneurial journey is like, and they can add strategic value and managerial value as well as cash. But let's come on to this. We talked
Greg, can I just jump on that very quickly? I think in addition to, and I completely agree with the point, speak to lots of different people, the ecosystem of entrepreneurs themselves is actually probably just as crucial, if not more crucial. You know, you've got entrepreneurs in the room, businesses that have done this before. They've raised from VCs or angels before. Don't just think you've got to do all the hard work yourself and find all these angels. You know, you might be having conversations, let's say to raise, I don't know, 150k, 250k SEIS, you might have to have 200 conversations with different angels. Leverage other entrepreneurs that have raised, speak to them, network with them. Who did you speak to? Who did you raise from? Who's a good investor? Who's a bad investor? You're out there to help yourselves, you know, so help each other, and it'll make the journey a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, so that pulls together a point that Nigel was making just now about the value of advice and connections, and then, yes, of other entrepreneurs who've been through that process, as Ed is just saying. I wanted to come on to a point that Lauren raised about potentially the psychology, or one of the barriers to financing is the entrepreneur themselves. Entrepreneurs can often be ideas bold, but finance averse, or at least fundraising, fund risk averse. How do the psychologies of entrepreneurs affect these different funding routes? What have you experienced as the block? Whether it's about the onerousness of going through a process, or whether it's the loss of control. Cherie-Anne, you're grabbing the microphone.
Yeah, because we see this all the time with our clients.
Right.
I think that our business is like our baby, right? Or as near enough. I think we hold deep emotional connections with the people in the company that we look after. We care about them. We also care a lot about our clients. So the decisions that we're making in terms of funding have an impact on all of our stakeholders, and we don't want to get that wrong. And I think entrepreneurs are extremely caring individuals, and they're not very good at also looking after themselves. So it's really important that we look at, okay, how do we pick the right funding routes, and how do we grow, or how do we exit in a way that's going to be right for your stakeholders, but also what are your own long-term plans, and how is that going to affect your personal finances, because it will. And quite often people will say, well, my business is my retirement pot, when actually it might not be worth that when you get to sell it, and that puts pressure on you to sell your business for a certain amount and perhaps work longer than you might need to or should be doing. So I think when you're working with founders or shareholders, it's really important to look at what you want to do, as well as caring for everybody else.
Thank you, Lauren. You?
Yeah, I suppose as well, it's about thinking about what someone can add outside of money. So actually to grow your business, you might need access to somebody who is a non-exec director, for example, who could sit on your board and give you a contact that you don't have that would enable you to grow your business. So, and also just to keep on revising your plans. People go, well, I need to raise equity at this stage, I need to do this at this stage, I need to do this at this stage. Well, actually, what you need to do is be dynamic and actually change your plans depending on the environment around you and the opportunities around you as well. And, you know, I think we've touched on it before. Look for other avenues as well. Like I always say to people, you know, we do venture debt, and people, I've never heard of venture debt. What is that? And sometimes even, you know, I've been in banking for 17 years and I'd never heard of venture debt. So you just...
Hang on a sec. What's venture debt? Asking for a friend, yeah.
I'm not doing a sales technique, by the way. But venture debt is for businesses that may not be profitable, so have established their concept but want to scale up, but that you will take something called an equity warrant, but it is on a debt structure. So something like a loan structure, and the equity warrant may have a dilution of sort of below 5%, but it will enable that business to grow in that stage of the journey, so that you're not giving away equity. Typically, people don't take a board seat, for example, but it will accelerate businesses, who have probably turned over about 2 million plus. But that's an example of something that people don't know about that may actually be transformational for the business when people don't want to give away control from an equity perspective.
Thanks. Let's throw it open. We've got a few minutes left of this session. You can say I'm asking for a friend and it's really about you, that old euphemism. So any queries about different debt routes you've considered or you less know about, or do you want to keep it all under wraps and talk over lunch? I suspect it's the latter. Let's come to this. How valid are fears that some entrepreneurs have, or some business owners have, of this is just going to be cumbersome, it's going to be a whole bunch of costs, it's going to be a tedious process and so on, it's a barrier to even getting started going through this process? Richard?
So, Greg, I think it ties into the point you were making before about leaders being scared to move things forward, in the same way that very often leaders are passionately involved in the business and they find it quite difficult to hand over to management or to a succession team. And in the same way, engaging with, say, equity investors can change the way that you manage the business. In terms of bringing on a debt provider, it can change the way that you manage the business. But those things can be planned and worked through, and it might be quite a significant change. But having someone, whether it be a mentor or an advisor, who's or a compatible partner, is able to help you on that journey, is what a lot of businesses do. So, for example, working with a team at the moment, and they're getting private equity investment. They started off and it was the last thing they wanted in the world, but they've begun to realise that it's not the worst thing in the world and it's actually the best option. And thinking through those issues with someone can be really helpful. Another big barrier might be personal guarantees, which are asked as standard, but they can be negotiated to a position where they're entirely acceptable to most investors. So working on those things can be really important.
And picking up Richard's point there about that company that didn't think about private equity but actually now is probably going to go down that route, perhaps for the other three to talk about, anonymised of course if you wish, of clients you've been helping recently and talking about their debt structuring or fundraising, rather. Who wants to spill the beans? Come on, give us some insights through of what it's like, that process.
I could choose our own business as an example of this. So at the moment, we have 3 offices, 30 members of staff. We're looking at taking that to the next level because we've got 8 financial advisors and our client bank is growing. So we are looking at raising additional sort of debt, essentially, to invest in changing our business and restructuring it and running it in a very different way. And we're looking at bank lending at the moment, recovery loan schemes and things like that, and talking to lots of different people to get advice on that. And it is very emotional, but one thing that it has done is it's given us focus. Because I think when you're running a business, as I said before, you care a lot about delivering a service to your clients. And every time I'm meeting a business owner at the moment, we'll keep talking about this chicken and egg thing. We haven't got enough resource at the moment to capitalise on the leads incoming and the interest in our businesses, but then we need the money to be able to afford the resource to capitalise on that, and you're forever going round in this circle. So by speaking to banks or raising additional finance, you're going to get more focus on what you're doing and you're going to have to make it work, because otherwise your house is on the line and you need a roof over your head. So it definitely focuses you. And I think, like, I've been in my business for 10 years now, and it's kind of given me that extra motivation and oomph to go, okay, this is what we're achieving over the next 5-10 years.
Which is one of Nigel's points about absolutely, when you're ready, absolutely go for it. Ed, a recent client or current client discussion you would care to share?
That's very difficult for me, seeing as we don't deal directly, do we?
No, but you have some sense of the ecosystem and processes, I would hope. I'm going to rescue.
No,
Laura's going to rescue.
It's
right.
fine. I'm fine. I got it. The journey is difficult. I'm going to come back to my original point. We've touched on grants. Grants are great. However, having previously worked for them, I know if the guy from Innovate UK was here, he would actually probably tell most of you not to bother with grants. They are distracting. They are very difficult to get, and it's a long process to get them. And quite often, you will find that a grant does not fit exactly what you're after. So the business is going in this direction as quickly as you can, because that's where you want to go, but the grant takes you off in this direction and actually stops you for 6 months while you're applying for the damn thing, and then another year and a half while you're delivering on the project, and you get towards the end of it, and let's say you've got an angel investor that's already come on board previously and say, well, where are you now? And say, well, we've gone all the way down here, but I thought you were going this way. So I'm not saying don't go for grants. I'm just saying make sure that they fit exactly what you're doing, because you may be better, you may spend the time better looking at other options. Equity is a great option. Again, it's probably a 4 to 6 month process. So it's a long time to get angel investment. Venture capital is probably similar. Debt is probably a shorter process, but is probably more focused on businesses that are already trading and profitable. So a specific type of business. Now you can save me.
Well, a parallel observation before Lauren, which is this. We had a really interesting discussion with an extremely successful commercial arts business called Theatre Royal Bath the other day, and they made the point that they don't seek public money, Arts Council, etc., because it will redefine the way the business thinks about itself and the obligations it has. It wishes to run as a commercial enterprise. So watch that tail wagging dog element, which I think Ed's touching on. Lauren.
Yeah, so we've recently picked up some very nice business from a company who's probably either the first or second highest growth drinks manufacturer in the UK. They went all the way down the private equity route and pulled out at the last minute because of this lack of control that they felt. And they felt that they would be held to plans, that you know, they were too dynamic, and they got all the way down the journey and were like, that actually it's the wrong thing for us. They couldn't get over that psychological barrier, and they've come to us. You know, they've raised money through their own invoice factoring, so they're using that money to put into their marketing, etc. Because actually the requirements for disclosure are a lot less in debt typically. So it all comes down, although ironically the private equity would have accelerated their growth probably an extra 2 years, would have accelerated that much, but they just could not cope with somebody sat there every month on their board telling them what to do in their heads, even though the reality is that probably wouldn't have happened.
Right. Thank you. We are at the end of this session. We've got a question here in the middle. If I could ask for reasonably succinct answers from our panel to this question, whatever it is.
Hi, name's Ian Robson. I run a marketing agency for the last 8 years, and I would say that the last 2 to 3 years we've been on more of a structured creation and execution of a growth plan. But certainly for the first 3 years or so, I wouldn't have had a clue as to what to do if a windfall of £500,000 was presented to me to invest in the business. So the question really is, how do you identify from a services-based business where there's no IP, there's no real value in the business apart from the client book, how do you identify what would you spend that money on and how would it accelerate you?
Over to me. It depends what you want to achieve. So you need to ask yourself some questions in and around, okay, I've got this money. Firstly, do I want it for myself, my staff, or do I want to invest it in growth? Or do I want to save it for a rainy day to build up my emergency fund, which I think was really important, for example, during COVID. So there's lots of different things that you can have a look at. There's the tax element as well. So depending on those different routes of what I'm going to spend it on, how's it going to impact on the tax? So this is why you need a financial advisor.
Very good. Got there.
I think it depends on your plan. So I know a media business that sold a property for about £1 million in it, and I think it helped transform it because it had a really clear plan about how to move things forward, and it had a good understanding of its business model and what was going to give and what was going to take with that extra investment. So I think sort of building a business model, have a really good understanding of that and your value proposition, and that will give you the confidence to move forward and whether to accelerate or not.
I'm sure you've got one more.
I'm just going to say something for you here.
Really?
Yeah, it comes all down to advisors as well. And I know you know like we've spoken previously about connecting people together. You know, what have your competitors done? How have they grown their business? Who can you bring into the business with that money who can provide you with the answer to the questions you've got, who's seen it, done it 100 times? Because there's loads of people out there who are very happy to come into a business, give you your time and say, actually, the way to grow your business with this money is X, and I will sit beside you. They might even take a shareholding in your business. You may have to pay however they want to be monetized, but they can bring lots of value in those circumstances. So it's about who you know, basically.
It's about who you know and what their skills are, and you've had a flavour of that today from our 4 panellists. I'd like to thank each of them. So Lauren, Cherie-Anne, Richard and Ed, thank you so much indeed.